or the yeah.
Okay, Professor, what does El Grito mean?
It means like the cry or something like that.
Oh, yeah, it's a buddy of mine who organized a
Or
5K
I think
or
it was,
10K.
or like, I'm crying out in pain, or I'm
Yeah,
crying out.
that
Yeah.
was me during the race that he organized. I think the rest of it meant like proud that we're doing the race or something. The cry. Cool.
Yeah.
El Grito. All right, Professor, has there ever been a weirder week in U.S. politics? Or actually, it's been like maybe a month, but is there?
Uh, I was gonna say we picked a good week to take a week off because
Yeah,
nothing
no kidding.
happened, right? Like,
Well, it was the day after we had our last conversation, and that the president was almost assassinated on Saturday after our last
right.
one. Then I went hiking up in the mountains last Friday, so we missed that. So, like, has this just been a crazy 2 weeks, or no? This always happens, John.
It's been a crazy 2 weeks. These are some crowded hours, I think.
Okay.
I mean, this is one of those things where if I was imagining writing a book about this, you can sometimes skip, a 7 year period or summarize 7 years in a paragraph. And then there will be these moments where you have to spend an entire chapter on the events of 11 days or something.
Right. Well, so Professor, I kind of want to phrase the first series of questions in a way. Does what's it matter to the U.S. citizen? I mean, I know we don't want our leaders assassinated, but occasionally, gosh, we have a pretty brutal history. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but percentage-wise, there are some nutcases out there through our history that want to assassinate. So, is that the important thing, or is somebody voluntarily stepping down? Does Biden's deal like George Washington? Do we once people get power, do they always keep it? I mean, and those are just two things. Maybe it's
Yeah.
Netanyahu's speech to Congress. I mean, what are the things that we as citizens should be reflecting on?
Oh, boy, so much has happened. I guess we should start with the assassination. The
Attempt.
Yeah, the assassination attempt. We did go through an era in the middle of the 19th century, so from the 1850s to the 19 teens, where the political assassination was uh, kind of common, and assassination attempts were common. And then, at least in the United States, um, among Americans, we got a little bit better at preventing them and having a little better security. Of course, uh, the big outlier being, well, I guess there were a lot of outliers, but Truman's was there was an assassination attempt on Truman, and then of course Kennedy and the Ford, Reagan, but in a sense, there are probably assassination attempts all the time.
Yeah.
That Secret Service is just good at preventing them before they even come close.
And do you mean
Um,
real assassination attempts or just somebody crazy online typing stupid stuff?
it's hard to say. I mean, but every time I get close to somebody in that world, and even in this counterterrorism, the kind of a world, they sort of say, there are always terrorist attacks on the United States. We're just good at preventing them. And the same is true of the Secret Service. They say, kind of, if it gets to the point where you have an assassin who is, at the site, then a lot of things have gone wrong up to that point. You do see a kind of copycat. I mean, I guess, to continue on the assassination thing, you do see that there's a kind of copycat effect with crime, and in a world where uh, people seek to find meaning in life, and this is one way that you can become famous or at least infamous.
Well,
It's
now you can do stupid dance videos on TikTok, so there's easier ways to do it now.
Yeah, yeah, but it's unclear. I mean, I guess we should to to speculate on what motivated the young man to try to kill former President Trump. We'll never know because he was killed on the site, um, but it's not that hard to speculate that the motives for this kind of behavior is, I don't know, no different than the motives for a lot of antisocial behavior. You have to have your values oriented in a certain way, and then you have to have a trigger, and you have to have opportunity, and then you get an attempt, and then the other thing is you have to get lucky. I mean, a lot of this is just luck and happenstance too. So I don't know that the average American should be drawing too many lessons from the assassination attempt itself. The
That's
fact
kind
that
of my conclusion. I really don't know if there's anything we need to do about it. I mean, it makes sense that the former head of the Secret Service resigned. I watched part of her testimony, and she needed to resign. And by the way, is this too bold? I think it having a president be in charge of the Secret Service who almost assassinated a former president. I think it's kind of good that Biden didn't decide to run for office. I just don't think it's just don't. Is that too bold of a statement? I mean, I think people up and down the chain of command should be gone. It shouldn't just be the head of the Secret Service. It should. There's some big bad mistakes in that.
I would just say probably, but I don't know enough about
Right.
I assume we're going to have a commission, we're going to have a report,
Yeah.
and I bet, but I mean, just based on how these things usually go, I bet we're going to find out that it's a combination of, you know, there's probably some bad management, a couple of lax decisions, a couple of politically motivated things, and then just
You think
a
there's a
little bit of
politically
a
motivated thing? I haven't seen those yet.
no, I just mean we're probably, it's not, when I say politically motivated, I don't mean we're going to find out that there's a Democrat who, on purpose decided to, um, let somebody take a shot at President Trump. The way that bias really works is that you just don't see the thing that, your bias keeps you from seeing a problem that somebody without a bias would see.
Okay,
And,
so let me
and
let me let me
yeah,
drill down on that. My bias is I don't mind attacking institutions. I've been doing that my whole career. But I still have faith in the institution, even if they screw up. I still believe in the system. And so to me, it looks like the system is kind of working. It's clearly a horrible mistake, but actions are being taken, and Congress is going to do their job, and the IG is going to do their job, and somebody already resigned. Good. Biden's no longer running for office. Fine. I mean, it seems to me like there's nothing I need to do. I don't
I
need to
guess,
complain.
and this is purely speculative on my part. So I take this with lots of grains of salt. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if we got to some point and it was like uh, somebody from the Trump campaign sent an email, and somebody from the Secret Service who had been tired of dealing with the yahoos at Trump land disregarded it and said, "Oh, there they go again."
Right. That wouldn't
That would be
surprise me
the
either, but isn't that the kind of stuff that probably happens all the time too? Everybody's
right.
asking for
That's
security
what
and
I'm
yeah.
exactly that.
So
That's what I'm saying in terms of the role
even
of
if even if something comes like that, to me, it's not something that we need to go protest on the streets over.
no,
Seems like
no,
this is
no.
working.
But I can tell you, like, all right, I'll give you an example of what this is like for my mild mannered professor. If I happen to grade 3 papers in a row that all plagiarize, I'm like angry at the next student, even though that next student deserves to have their paper treated exactly the same way. And if
Right.
somebody has been, if the last person has been annoying, you don't have the best attitude when the next person walks in the door. I expect to see that there's going to be something like that,
Right.
or I wouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't say
Yeah.
expect to see, but I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens, where you have
I
somebody who's
agree.
yeah.
And but do you agree with my statement that there's not really anything we as citizens need to do? We don't need to write our congressman. We don't need to go protest in the streets. We don't need to be I don't know. We don't need to do anything. It seems like the system's working.
I guess, but I would say that citizens should be as interested as ever in going into public service and doing a good job.
Love that.
If
Yeah.
you're the kind of person who's motivated to go into that kind of career, then absolutely go into it with the idea that you're going to be the one who goes in there and does the best job possible in
Love that.
public service.
Okay. Okay, agreed. Is there anything? I mean, obviously, the founding of my former party and your current party was assassinated, and you mentioned Truman, and you mentioned Reagan and Ford. Is there anything historically that we should keep in mind? I mean, like, here's one. I think I've only met one or two presidents. Clinton, I met like three times when I was an elected official at that time, and he visited our jurisdiction, and so I was a commissioner, so I got to meet him. And I remember vividly, because I was in the army at the same time, I remember vividly watching the security around the president. And it's intense. I mean, one time when he reached out in the crowd, and I happened to be in the crowd right there to shake hands, I mean, he reached way into the crowd. He was a pretty personable guy. He liked people. He liked shaking hands and hugging people. Anyway, I remember a Secret Service agent's hand down his pants because I was right there. I was looking at it. I was going, God, that's kind of weird. I mean, down his pants and on his belt because he was leaning way into the audience, ready to rip the president back into the Secret Service arms in case some wacko in the audience wanted to pull him into the crowd. I was going, wow, these guys are in the snipers on board, ready to kill us if we, it was intense. I want to be able to have some access to a president. And every time one of these things, whether it's January 6th or assassination attempts, it takes away the citizens' ability to have more authentic contact with our leaders. And that bothers me because the more sterile it becomes, more room, you can't really tell the president what's really on your mind because it could be dangerous. It bothers me. I wish we would somehow avoid this as citizens because it damages our democracy. You agree with that, or?
Yeah, but I would also just say that like security forces have gotten so much better at widening the area of protection that the times that I've met with powerful people with a lot of protection, it's always been quite natural. And it's only in those sort of uncontrolled situations that maybe it can seem intense, but Bill Clinton came to Visalia a few years ago, and one of my friends walked up to him and shook his hand, and he said he had exactly opposite. He said he was so frail,
Oh, well, remember that
he's
was
like, I was going
currently.
to shake his hand, and I thought I was going to break his hand when
You forget how old I am, Professor. This was a long time ago when I met the president. Yeah.
yeah, but just to let you know that like a citizen, a good friend of mine, walked right up to Bill Clinton and shook his hand.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and that was within a couple of years ago. And I've been around. I don't know. I think security does a really good job in terms of especially using AI and digital, technology. What you can do to keep the threats away. They do a pretty good job of intervening really early. It's only in these cases where you have somebody with no online presence at all, and that's just pretty rare. And no friends, and that you almost have to have a not be a non. You have to not use a credit card, and a cell phone, and is so. I don't know. In terms of access to elected officials, you can still meet with all the ones who really matter. You can still meet with your city councilmen and your county supervisors, and you can still go to your state rep's office, and most of the time your congressman's office, although I've been in some congressional offices where they faced specific threats and they had to have security, but even most congressional offices are not that hard to get
Right.
to.
They have gotten a lot
Um,
more intense in the last decade, I think. Yeah. The
And
local.
usually the cost of admission, everybody talks about campaign finance. I took my kids out to dinner last night, and with tip, we were out the door. It was $75. And I was thinking about how, the price of admission for most political events is usually about $100. So If you really want instead of taking your kids to Chili's, take them to a fundraiser and they can meet all the politicians they want.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that's a good point. So, what else on assassination? Anything?
Yeah, I guess my big takeaway, I had two big takeaways, and it wasn't the stuff we've discussed so far. First was I was surprised by Trump's immediate reaction to it when he jumped back up and said fight, fight, fight. And then another thing that I haven't heard
What do
any
you mean surprised though? Pleasantly surprised or shockingly surprised, embarrassingly surprised? What kind of surprise?
Oh, I try not to put a value on this because I
On a
remember talking
surprise?
to my
Why not?
Uncle Alan about being in World War II. I mean, my Uncle Alan was he said something about, I was asking towards the end of his life about like who died and who lived. And he said, for whatever reason, I kept my head down. And there are people who, when shots start going, they stick their heads up. And you don't know until the bullets are flying who's going to stick their heads up and who's going to put their heads down, and you don't know how you're going to act. And he really wanted to emphasize, with me at least, that like these are all good people. This is an involuntary physical response that you have, and it doesn't mean that you're a good person or a good president or it's associated with leadership or anything like that. I just mean that in this particular case, we learned one thing, which is that when he was shot at, he was able to follow instructions, crouch down, and then once he heard the danger had passed, pop up, and seize the moment politically. And the other thing that I haven't heard any commentators mention was to watch the crowd's response when you watch the footage. If you haven't done so, you've done it a million times. Instead of watching President Trump, watch what the crowds do after the shots. And I guess what I find amazing is that for how much I deride President Trump and his supporters, there is one thing that I always give them credit for, and that is um, really angry bravery. Meaning these are how many people popped up and started flipping the bird at where the shots were coming from. Like I find that to be amazing, frankly. Like there is something I don't know, American about that is maybe not the best. I don't know. I mean, maybe it is just it just struck me as a very American moment that within seconds after shots are fired, that you have some Americans who are popping up, wheeling over to the direction where the shots are coming from, and start flipping the bird and yelling at them. And I just like, wow. I'm not. And then how the crowd responded to instructions. There was no panic. There were no stampedes. There was no if I were a social psychologist, I would want to study this event.
Yeah,
What is it that makes Trump supporters the kind of people who show up to a rally, right? And again, we're not talking about everybody, but to the point where it becomes the social psychology of that crowd that their response to an assassination attempt is anger and fighting and calm and orderly compliance with law enforcement officers immediately afterwards. I think that a social psychologist could study that event for the rest of their lives and never get to the bottom of all that.
yeah, yeah. I agree. That's an insightful comment. The only thing that surprised me about that in relationship is our army training says taught us that you can train how you're going to behave when you get shot at. In fact, you must do the following things. Drop. I mean, don't do anything else. Just drop down to the ground because it's harder to hit you when you're in the dirt. There's bushes, there's trees, there's rocks. Plus, you're in the dirt. and then roll over and move away because they know where you dropped. So roll out of the way, and then just
Yeah.
lay suppressive fire because you're trying to get them to duck.
But that's why when we're discussing military effectiveness, we always say that militias can never stand up to a professional army because you have to be taught those skills.
Yeah,
And
you
if you're
think because most
not,
people
that
just
what
look around.
yeah,
Yeah,
you'll look around or run or
yeah.
so I agree that these things can all be taught, but
So it was interesting though that it didn't seem like there was many defensive maneuvers. They were like looking around, and that's interesting. Yeah, I agree on the sociology. Bart, do you have anything to add to this legally?
Legally, yeah. What I'm going to be curious about is what the investigation shows, because I think there are some weirdnesses to what happened. And it's kind of like, I don't know, like John, earlier you were talking about how good, well, kind of the tactics the Secret Service uses, when you're that close to somebody like that, like Trump or somebody. And obviously there was a major gap somewhere because what's coming out is that, well, I don't know, there obviously was a lack of communication between somebody, because they let this guy get in this position where he had a clear shot, and you can chalk it up to incompetence, which is kind of where I'm going with it, because that's sort of, I mean, usually when you think there's a conspiracy involved, it's usually because of weird fortuitous circumstances that all come together at the same time. And that seemed to be what was going on there. It seems like that, number one, somebody decided, okay, that particular building was not going to be considered within their protective perimeter, but the building was really close. So it's kind of like, okay, why? Why would you do that? And then they left the local police in charge of that area. Well, the local police were having trouble communicating with the Secret Service. And you kind of wonder, okay, come on, what, how many things can you line up here to create a situation where this could have happened, Because I can't imagine. I haven't been around as many, I don't know, presidents, like John has, or even, Stephen, what you were talking about. But, I was around the vice president at one point, and I did get up to the rope line, and I was, up there, and I shook his hand and everything. And it was a little weird because there were so many Secret Service people around. There was no way you could do anything. I was holding kind of a stack of papers in my hand, not a stack, but the program basically for the event. Well, a Secret Service person came up, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Here, I'm going to take your, that folio or whatever you're holding and put it on the chair behind you, because I need to be able to see your hands." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, thank you." But it's like, you've got to be kidding, they let this guy climb up on top of the roof, get in there in a crouch position, and start shooting at people. And the other part that's weird to me is that at this point, the investigation is showing they don't know exactly what kind of projectile hit Trump. Like Trump has said he was shot through the ear with a bullet. Well, I've heard reporting, and I don't know if it's true or not, that if a bullet had actually gone through his ear, it would have caused a lot more damage to his ear. So they're thinking, okay, so what was he hit with? Was it shrapnel? What was it? And it kind of doesn't matter, but it's curious. It's like, okay, this is kind of weird. This guy gets shot kind of in the head, and he walks away with that weird white bandage on his ear. And that's it. It's kind of like, okay, this is a little weird. And again, I'm not trying to ascribe kind of, oh God, this was a conspiracy to only wound him, because I think that's really stupid. There's so many, that just wouldn't happen like that. But what in the world, it's just a weird, the whole thing seems weird.
Quickly, this isn't that weird. I bet you might even have an answer on this. Why did the Secret Service director say demur to all this and say, "I can't tell you, can't tell you, can't tell you"? And then yesterday, the FBI director came out and said, "No, it wasn't a bullet that hit his ear. We've counted for all the bullets." Between the two, no information and like pure authoritative information, it was not a bullet. That's what he said in front of Congress yesterday.
Yeah.
what's it legally? Why are they acting that way? I bet she was given legal advice not to say anything.
Yeah. And
Fired.
I bet the reason why is that one of the things security people are really focused on is they don't want to reveal their secret sauce to how they protect people.
Methods.
And I don't, like they were asking, well, did you have enough people and stuff, and she can't really say, well, we had 236 guys there, because then the bad guys supposedly will know, ooh, they've only got 236. Well, at the next event, we're going to start counting. And if they only have 250, we're going to know we have an opportunity, which is kind of, I don't know if that's here nor there, but, and I also think there is jealousy between the Secret Service and the FBI about things. So it doesn't surprise me that the FBI, which is really, I'm sure they're hyper investigating this event, sure, they've got more information and, they're going to try to reveal it in a different way than the Secret Service would. Certainly.
Right. Professor, any instincts on Bart's reaction to all this?
Yeah, I think you're right. But I also, I guess the thing that Bart didn't mention are that the rules of engagement. I always think of, bureaucrats are cautious, and people are very cautious when it comes to pulling the trigger. And, they're given these rules that say, this is when you can take out somebody. And I can imagine a sniper sitting there going, this might just be an enthusiastic Trump fan with a spotting scope that he's using as a telescope. And I don't want to be the guy who murders a Trump fan who ends up having nothing more than a spotting scope, who had climbed up on a roof to get a view of the president. And so they're,
well, or even more potentially understandable is it, well, wait, that's the local cops. Maybe there's a local cop that I could kill.
And there's often a kind of like separation of labor that says, like, I have to stay focused on this, not that. That is somebody else's. And in order to do my job well, I need to stay hyper focused on this and understand, trust that this other person is doing their job. So who knows? But probably politically, it was very good for Donald Trump. Let's just transition to our next topic. And so,
I agree with that, Professor, but is also because of the next topic. What, we have a presidential assassination and the whole news cycle lasts less than a week because of the next thing, and now isn't it probably in the history books now?
Well, because we can only pay attention to one thing at a time. There's no such thing as multitasking. The human brain can only focus on one thing at a time. So
moving on, what's your next?
So moving on, we go to the convention. Trump is soaring to his the highest popularity, his highest favorability rating ever, 40. He has, and Joe Biden, because of the debate, is just looking like it's just going to be a landslide election, and Trump is going to win in a walk, which probably leads him to overplay his hand in a couple of ways. Number one, he chose a vice president, the vice presidential nominee that probably didn't add too much to the ticket. And then number two, after running a pretty good convention, he went off script and gave a speech so long that nobody watched it. And
I made 75 of the 90 minutes.
Yeah. So
I was the only one in the history of the United States that has watched that much of it. It was so long and tiresome and boring and meandering and a stream of consciousness. I can't believe I watched 75 minutes of it.
So if he had given a 22-minute speech and gone the other direction, then he would have come out and he had chosen a vice president capable of winning a state or reaching out to some constituent group. We would say he has this thing locked up. And then, whiplash to Democrats finally getting to President Biden.
Hold on,
And
let's skip that for a second. Let's go
okay,
stick on JD Vance for a second. How important are vice presidents? My initial thought is JD Vance might be a pretty good selection for him. I didn't study
yeah,
him. I haven't read his book, hadn't watched the movie. And I went, I don't
well,
know. It's a good
I,
help. I thought yes. Now I'm not
I've
so
been
certain.
cautioning people to tell you to say that just because you read his book and watched the movie, that doesn't mean you know what JD Vance is now. Because I read the book and I watched the movie, and I don't know JD Vance, but again, I sort of know people who know JD Vance, and they all tell me that he was a wonderful human being, and smart, and he's got a great wife, and a nice guy who had good character, and then who knows what he's doing now. So I would just caution you and say that just because you read his book doesn't mean you know who he is now. Uh,
Well, it sounds like you been reading the Dispatch too much. They probably
maybe.
talk about this a lot.
Well, I don't know that I've been reading the Dispatch. I've been reading what he's been saying over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, he started running for Senate, and the other piece of this is that he runs behind Trump. So he's less popular than Donald Trump, and they really had to spend a lot of money to get him to win in a very solidly Republican state. So and he's from Ohio, a state that Trump was going to win anyway, and Kentucky, and Trump's going to win those regions anyway. I think that picking someone with a connection to the older Republican Party might have been a wiser choice, or somebody who could be somewhat reassuring, that
You could heal the split in the Republican Party over the last decade.
well, JD Vance does have this one characteristic that almost nobody has, and that is that he has politically come of age entirely in the Trump era. He has no connection politically to the Republican Party. And I guess Trump maybe sees that as an asset. But people have also told me that Trump really trusted his advice.
Well, through his son, right?
Yes, but but I think he's a smart guy. I mean, and a lot of people are also criticizing him for being ambitious and saying that this is probably just the result of ambition, but I would also just say, God, every politician is like that.
You have to have it, yeah.
Everybody's got a little bit of a screw loose in that regard. They're all slightly narcissistic and grandiose, and
Well, you just get beat up all the time. You have to build them an immunity around you. I know that from personal experience. You just have to. You get criticized every day. Every time you open your mouth, somebody comes up and says, "That was stupid. I disagree, and you shouldn't have said that. And I don't like the way you're dressed."
Yeah.
What?
So I don't know that that's necessarily something that's unique to him, his ambition, but I don't know.
You think it's a lousy pick, huh? You really don't like
I don't
him.
know. I wouldn't say it's lousy. I would just say that it's, I mean, I look at it this way, like, I'm trying to think of a good sports analogy. It's like, maybe this is, I shouldn't talk about baseball because I don't know that much about baseball, but you think about like what you're trying to do on offense is get somebody on base, and then maybe something could happen. And that's kind of what a vice presidential pick is. You can't really score a run with a vice presidential pick, but you can get somebody on base. You can set yourself up to score a run later. And it seems like the Vance pick it didn't hurt, but it didn't set up a potential success.
I don't know. I think in the last couple days that it may really hurt. There's a lot of women that I know that are you just can't criticize single women and cats, man. If you seriously that,
yeah, I just don't know that I don't know if that's real. I don't know. First of all, ask yourself, a single one of those women who you've heard from, were any
Yeah.
of them going to vote for Donald Trump?
That's a
I
great
mean,
question.
Jennifer Aniston was going to vote for Donald Trump.
I didn't know
If
her
if
before.
if
But, yeah.
JD Vance said something nice about single women and cats,
All
like,
right, you pick a fight with Taylor Swift and let's see what happens.
yeah, Taylor Swift wasn't going to vote for Donald Trump. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
don't say anything negative about her. We'll actually get a lot of viewers to our show finally if you do.
if I saw, yeah, I don't know. She seems like a lovely person, but
There you go.
I don't think
Hey,
I can't think of
Jake,
anything to say
Jake,
about her.
jump in.
I think, but here I'll criticize Taylor Swift for a moment.
Oh God.
She pretends that she's surprised when people clap for her, and I know that's not true. She
Oh, you
can't
mean her
possibly still be surprised when people cheer when she walks out on stage.
fake
You know,
modesty?
yeah, that's always bothered me about her. It's almost like professional wrestling. She's the WWF of or WWE. I mean, that shows my age, right?
Jake,
Uh,
do not quote this and put this on the interweb. We will get attacked forever.
yeah, yeah. But anyway,
Okay,
so I
okay,
don't,
John.
yeah.
What's that, Jake?
Well, I just want to kind of jump in. Sorry, I don't need to be on camera right now. Yeah, whatever. So, anyways, I just want to say, like, regarding Trump choosing Vance as his VP, kind of going back to like what Tootle was saying, like, I don't think the Vance kind of adds much to the ticket, but at least kind of like Trump is not having to invent hysteria around Vance. Like people already have their own feelings about him. But if you look at the pivot with Kamala, okay, they're trying to make Kamala out to be like, oh, she was destined to always be the Democratic nominee for president at one point, despite the fact that the Biden administration has kind of not let her out in public for like the past 2 years.
I think that's true.
I mean, it's funny because I always think it's strange that like Trump and Biden have so much in common, and people act like they're the opposite of one another. But both of them are don't like anybody challenging them. They're both, and so Biden didn't do a lot to help Kamala Harris. He gave her impossible jobs that she failed at. and
Anything else besides securing the border? Did she have other jobs?
yeah, Middle East peace. You know, I and was she also, there was one other, was it energy independence or something like that? I don't remember, but it was like three things that, and not only did she not kind of do anything, but the Biden administration didn't help her in any regard. And anyway, it's kind of the behavior of a mean, angry old man who doesn't want to be challenged by somebody
Interesting point.
younger.
Research there. Do you have you have something to respond to that?
Yeah, what was her third job?
I don't remember what the major jobs were other than the border. Yeah, that was the first one, but she kind of wasn't really, I mean, she was very ineffective with that. I don't know about the other ones.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess that should tell you what maybe
Yeah.
what you need.
Yeah.
Like the fact that four people who pay attention to politics can't tell you what definitively what the other two things are, and that she has no successes. I mean, I don't know if you remember when Al Gore, who was pretty integral to the Clinton administration, but when he was talking about government effectiveness and efficiency, like he was out there on Letterman, and people knew that he was in charge of something. And Bill Clinton did a pretty good job of bringing Al Gore along and making people understand that he was an equal partner who was respected, and the same goes for Dick Cheney. Is there anybody who doubts Dick Cheney's influence? Like,
super influence. Yeah, I mean, over influence. Yeah.
So, in a way, Biden, it almost is again, if we get to the psychology of it, I guess we could probably overdraw this, but because Biden was sort of somewhat slighted by the Obama administration, maybe he felt that he could, now it's his turn to be abusive to his vice president. I don't know.
Well, Professor, I was really surprised. I concur with what you're saying, that Biden didn't do her any favors, and she didn't do herself any favors, except the notable exception of overturning Roe versus Wade and the Dodd decision. She got out there and spoke pretty passionately on that issue, and for a lot of women, or liberals at least, and liberal women, boy, that resonates with them. And I think that's part of the reason for the excitement for her, is that one.
Yeah.
But I was really surprised that the Democrats were able, or she, I guess not Democrats. Well, yeah, Democrats. How the heck did they coalesce around her in 2 days?
Well,
that's
the big part of the answer is that once it looked like not only was Biden going to lose, but it was going to be a complete bloodbath at every level of government for Democrats outside of the sort of stronghold states. Once it looks like incumbent politicians are going to lose their jobs, that's when they start getting on the phone with one another and saying, what are we going to do? Because you have a kind of collective action problem. Nobody's going to do anything until everyone's willing to do it. And so Nancy Pelosi seemed to be the person who was receiving most of these phone calls, in part because I think because she is out of government, they could have, and so you had this sort of Clinton faction. Pardon?
Isn't she pretty impressive? You may not like her politics, but isn't
yeah,
she
yeah. I mean, she is a private citizen, and she convinced
she was
the
Congress.
Yeah, she's still a member of Congress.
Oh, is she? Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, she hasn't resigned her
Congress,
seat or anything.
Yeah, sorry, she still has her seat, but she's no longer the speaker. And so she's and she's no longer the Democratic leader. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of stuff wrong right now.
The thing that surprised me about what Pelosi did is that she really she somehow convinced Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to basically keep their powder dry throughout what was going on with Biden. And I thought that was a pretty amazing feat, because Bernie Sanders put an editorial in the New York Times essentially endorsing Biden during the middle, between the debate and when Biden dropped out. And I was thinking, how the hell did that happen? It's like, what?
Well, because again, if you're thinking about how, Bernie Sanders wasn't going to lose his seat. Ocasio-Cortez was not going to lose her seat, but but they lose a lot when the Democratic majorities lose. So, and if you lose a lot of colleagues, you lose a lot of influence for yourself as well. So if what you saw, I think, was a lot of Democrats realizing that Biden had to be replaced. And the other thing is like the fact that he couldn't defend himself at all. There was nobody had an answer. And even still, I don't think people watched even Biden's farewell address and thought, this is a guy who could go another 4 years, No,
it was a pretty good speech. It was a nice farewell address. I listened to it and I thought it was a good farewell address, but you're right. He's old.
Yeah. And the more remarkable thing, I guess, or to me, is the thing I wasn't expecting was that they also whipped up the votes enough votes in the state delegations to win Harris the nomination on the first ballot when it takes place.
No, but it's like crazy. There's only 45 delegates out of 3,000 or whatever that haven't decided. 45 out of 3,000? That's a discipline I didn't think Democrats even had it in them.
Well, it's not impossible to imagine, because these are top-down organizations where you call 50 people and they call 50 people, and they call 20 people, you know, and that can happen within hours. So if you think about like how, my degrees of separation from President Trump, even to today at this moment, it's 2. You know, it's not that hard for me if to get a message from somebody pretty high up in the national political organization. I mean, I know a guy who knows a guy, you know, and that's it. And so it's not that hard for me to get to talk to my 10 friends and
I know, but you're still, there's a lot of ambitious people out there, Professor. So I appreciate your answer, but there's
no,
still.
but I'm telling you that ambition is the answer. You're just not. Let me explain. The ambition is for themselves,
Right.
not the national ticket. So what is good for the Democratic Party is Kamala Harris, whether she wins or loses. So they win if they win, and they win if she loses. The way the Democrats win if she loses is that, number one, it means that they still have Donald Trump to kick around. I mean, there are a lot of Democrats who earnestly and honestly believe that Donald Trump is the true representation of the Republican Party, and that he just revealed the rot that has been there since 1856. And this is who the Republicans have always been, and the country would be better off if this party didn't exist. And Donald Trump is the vehicle to destroy the Republican Party. And so what is good for the country is for Donald Trump to remain the head of the Republican Party for as long as possible. And Democrats will fund the campaigns of his supporters in order to make sure that Donald Trump is the face of the Republican Party. And what this does is it preserves the jobs of every Democrat running for office. It's good for every Democrat if Donald Trump remains the face of the GOP. So what we end up with is a very strange situation where, and I think that's what explains the rapid support for Kamala Harris, was they realized that, number one, there's only downside if somebody like a Gavin Newsom decides to stick his head out, because you're going to be the one who ran against the first Black woman to ever run for president, right? And who wants to be that person? And the answer is nobody. So you're already not inclined to challenge her. Number two, if she runs and wins, she could either be a bad president and lose the next election. It's unlikely that she's going to be a great president and win the next election after that, or she loses the election and the decks are now cleared for you. So
Okay.
every one of her rivals is looking at this as a way of keeping Donald Trump in the front of mind and moving Kamala Harris out of the way so that they can then compete for her seat.
I'll stipulate that your argument was better than my instinct.
I just think that when you want to know, when you have a collective action problem, there's usually a collective action solution that is presenting itself. And in collective action, caution is almost always the motivating factor. How do I protect what's mine right now? And if the instinct among every elected Democrat across the United States is, how do I protect what is currently mine? It's, let's all get behind Harris and support her. And if she loses,
will you at least give me this? After, I don't know how many millions of people voted for Biden in the primaries, that it would have been better for our representative democracy, or our republic, to have some kind of open mini primary at the open. It would have been better for our society to see the debate within the Democratic Party.
Let's call this the somewhere between the 5th and the 9th time that the Democrats had a chance to put Donald Trump away, and they didn't.
Oh, now wait further. So you like that point. So what do you mean? Explain.
I just mean that this isn't yet another example of, like, if the Democrats had some sort of mini convention and organized it in such a way to choose a good candidate who would actually win, they could have done so. And they again chose not to do that because it's better. So what you have to assume is they believe it's better for them to have this other scenario. The same way they did it twice with impeachment. They did it with funding all of these election campaigns. They did it with their senatorial spending. They did it with how they supported him in his first 2 runs. I mean,
well, you didn't say she's a lousy candidate. It's just implied. I'm not sure I'll accept that, but I think there's a possibility that she's going to beat. She's going to beat Trump. I actually give it a 50.
No, there's a possibility because Trump has a 60% unfavorable rating. But here's the thing, because he has a 60% unfavorable rating, and it's probably going to go up to 65% pretty soon, because that's kind of, and maybe even 70%. I mean,
no way. Oh, unfavorable.
Unfavorable, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right.
Yes, of course she could win, but if you wanted to make sure that you were going to win, you would not elect the person who has a voting record that is not only to the left of Bernie Sanders and every other Democrat in the Senate, but there is not a single issue that she has ever been presented with when she did not take the most radical position. Like none. I mean, maybe you'd say Israel, but in every other issue in American political life, there is footage of Kamala Harris taking the most radical leftist position.
See that there's 102 days, if I counted right, before the election, and we're going to see
Trust
clips
me, you're going to see it. If you haven't seen it yet, you will soon, because she came up in California politics, and California politics is a gravity-free environment for Democrats, which means that the way you win in California is by always taking the most radical position. So it's the same problem that Gavin Newsom would have, although Newsom, because he's been governor and because he's probably a better speaker, he can sometimes spin this in a way that can get him through a debate. But in an election season, if the Trump campaign wants to win, they should just be putting together nothing but, I mean, they could probably put together a 60-minute clip of Kamala Harris just saying offensive things in 10-second sound bites, and they should be issuing these in 30-second clips, for the next 102 days, because there is footage of her supporting and raising her hand for everything. I mean, name a social issue and then look up what Kamala Harris. I would just say to any listener who thinks that I'm not telling the truth, think of any issue, then try to find out what Kamala Harris has actually said about that issue or how she voted. And you will find that whatever the most radical position you could imagine or question that is posed to her, that's the position she has taken.
Well, man, you were in a quandary. You don't like former President Trump and you don't like the Democratic nominee. I assume you don't like some wacko, I shouldn't call him a wacko, but Kennedy.
You can call him wacko if you want.
Right. Yeah. You're in a dilemma. What a bummer for you this year.
Yeah, it's been a bummer for me for a while now. I don't. There are no national political candidates. I mean, sometimes you think about, like, just to circle back to something about JD Vance, like, I remember not liking Obama because he was just an inexperienced senator. And, the guy had been a United States senator for 18 months and hadn't done anything. And I just thought, you're just going to make this guy president of the United States? Well, look at JD Vance. Like, I mean, and then
He's younger.
and all the people who criticized Trump, and I was like, well, remember when you were criticizing Obama? Like none of these people are quality candidates. None. They're all bad. None of them have ever done anything of consequence where they had a challenge, a challenge that they sort of overcome, built something, appealed to anyone other than their own supporters. Like, I just
Okay,
don't
let me steal a play from your playbook then. Maybe after this election, we can entice a Florida University president out of that lucrative, prestigious job to run for president.
he just resigned because his wife has some health problems, and he's
fine.
Yeah, he's going to they're gonna be kind of circling the wagons around family for a while.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, his wife has some, but we're talking about Ben Sasse for any listeners who aren't aware. But oh, go ahead.
That's the kind of
also,
noble.
like, Mitch Daniels should have been president of the United States. Like, I don't know. If Republicans wanted to win, they would have nominated Mitch Daniels. If the Democrats wanted to win, they could have nominated Mitch Daniels. So, like, I mean, it's there are a lot of candidates. If either party presented somebody who was normal, they would still arouse the opposition of 30 to 40% of America. But a normal candidate could win 65% of the popular vote right now.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have a true person who could unite America? And that means you have to unite with some centrists and moderates, and or you can't just be the anti-candidate in order to really run America. We have to have this divided stuff.
Well, you have to be able to explain your positions in a way that a non-sociopath would explain positions. You have to know you have to know things, and you have to be able to explain them in a way that a normal person could understand. And that is seemingly too high of a bar right now.
Well, let's hope for some good health and recovery for Ben Sasse's wife then, because he can do all that.
I mean, our candidates for office are like a person with a weird personality disorder with no, seemingly, I don't know. Yeah. And the other one's Donald Trump. Like, Kamala Harris, who knows? Here's where I will be holding out some hope. Here's our sliver of hope, if you want a sliver of hope. Maybe she's been lying her whole life, and she's just been saying whatever she had to say in order to win the next office, and that actually deep within her is the heart of a patriot, and she's a competent, unifying, normal person that she has just not been able to reveal on any political stage up to this point.
In her defense, she's had a good 5 days, hasn't she?
I don't know. I mean,
you've heard her. Haven't you?
What's that?
You've heard her, haven't you? She's given some pretty optimistic, positive, can-do, spirited defense of herself, or advocacy for herself in the last 5 days, has she not?
Yeah, but let's not convince ourselves that these 4.5s are 10s.
Okay, fair enough. Well, how about when compared to JD Vance's last 5 days? Well,
I mean, I guess I would just say, if his 4s, you're
tough.
Jake's got something.
I'm glad you're not grading my papers. Bart or Jake, do you have anything to add before I ask my last question of the professor?
Yeah, Jake's got something.
So I
Jump
just
in,
want
Jake.
to say something that something that Tootle mentioned.
Man,
Okay,
you look like
JD
you're on one of those
Vance
deserted
basically,
island. Hold on, Jake. You look like you're on one of those TV reality shows from the island.
John, sorry, I woke up. I'm at my wife's aunt's house in middle of nowhere, Oregon. We're going to the beach. We're about like 5 minutes away from the beach. We are in a tiny unincorporated town that has like 100 people in it right now.
You
Nice.
look
So,
amazing. Now, if you want to dress up, look like Bart, but you look like you're heading to the beach. All right, I'm glad you explained.
okay,
Anyway,
whatever, John, I just got out of bed. So,
what was your point,
something
Jake?
I want to kind of add on to what Tootle was saying in that JD Vance basically has no political career apart from being a Trump stooge for the past 18 months, whereas Kamala at this point has over a decade of history. And for anyone who paid attention to the 2020 election during the Democratic primaries, Tulsi Gabbard pulled up all of Kamala's dirty laundry and she brought it out during the debate, and then Kamala dropped out like the next day. That video clip of Tulsi Gabbard attacking Kamala during the debate is recirculating around social media, and kind of Doodle's point, if the Trump campaign really wants to like destroy her image, they just need to show old video clips of her talking about things. In addition to all of her bizarre video clips since she's been VP, where she talks about people falling out of coconut trees, and then she says bizarre things like, we have been unburdened by what has been, which is like her main catchphrase.
You know, and
Yeah, I always feel bad because it is a weird thing to say over and over again, but it's not a bad point.
it's not.
You know, like again, for people who are not up on the meme wars of you know, Brat Summer and I don't know if you guys even know what that is, or all this stuff about coconut trees, but one of the things that she repeats in a lot of speeches is that some version of like, we should be unburdened by the past and think about what kind of a future we can have, which is a good enough point. You know, it's but it's it's not the content of the thought that is troubling, and this is just something that you it's just, she seems like a weirdo.
Yeah. Okay. So I got a counterpoint to both you, Professor, and to Jake. And I wouldn't know this except I was listening to NPR yesterday. Sorry to listen to NPR, but and they had a whole special on how dramatic the endearing she is because of the coconut tree and those kind of odd comments. And so Jake is like having a heart attack. No, it's become endearing that the people love her for that stuff. And so from a social media angle, wow, good for them. I don't know.
I guess, but
John,
I just don't know that that's endure. Like when she can't, she doesn't have like loyal staffers, and that's sometimes like a little bit of a red flag too. You know, because even
Yeah.
Joe Biden had people who had worked for him for a long time, and
Oh, I think people loved him.
yeah, but it's just a lot of actually Trump-like red flags.
That's going to be
You
good.
know,
Jake, go ahead and pile on me.
apparently Trump is just going to run against himself no matter what. I don't know.
well,
Pile on.
and to Toodle's point, something that's come out, and this has come up in the past. Apparently, Kamala's comms team and PR team, they hate her, and like they're all quitting en masse because they will go through, like they will do a ton of research and stuff for her to like prep her for public events, and then they say that she will not read the briefs. She will go to the event. She will look like she has no idea what's going on, and then after the event, she will come back and yell at her comms team.
Huh. Well, that
And
sounds tough.
so,
Yeah.
because I thought her comms team was just run by like college students, which to be fair, it might be. but like her Commissar teams are actually doing work for her. She just doesn't care to look at any of it.
Well, that sure sounds Trumpian. Okay, Bart, last call.
No, I think I'm good. I don't
Okay.
know. It was kind of an interesting, fascinating week.
Yeah, no doubt. So, Professor, just give us a tickler, and not a futurist, but just give us a tickler. What we should be thinking about here in coming weeks. I mean, it will all change. There'll be more surprises, but as citizens, how should we be thinking through this
Are
political
you
season?
talking about in terms of the horse race or in terms of statesmanship?
How to be better citizens?
Um, well, if all you care about is who's going to win, I think watch for the penetration of Kamala Harris. Can the Trump team get it together enough to put Kamala Harris's actual political positions and hang them around her neck? Because if they can do that effectively, he wins. And even after the good week that Harris has had, she's still not winning in enough states to win the electoral vote, and this might be the best, most positive week she gets. So if I would say, if look at state polling, the state polling on like Real Clear Politics or something for the electoral vote, and just in the next 2 weeks, see if it moves at all.
Okay,
See if any states become competitive.
Sure.
I would also say, like, try to kind of ignore the national polls, because because we're dealing with two candidates with such high unfavorability ratings that the difference between an unfavorability rating will also maybe affect turnout. So it means that if people don't turn out for Harris, what does that mean? Well, it just means she's not going to run up the totals in California. So I would say set those aside. In terms of what else I'll be looking for in terms of the race, in a way, like, can the Trump team show any sign of competence by doing that? And what's the Democratic response going to be? Are they going to make a real play to actually win, or is Harris just being sent up as a sacrificial lamb?
Wow.
And I think that the VP pick will probably be a good indicator of whether the Democrats actually, think they can. Well, I shouldn't say think they can win. They can always win because Trump has such high unfavorability ratings. But do they moderate? Can Harris come out and basically disavow everything she's ever said, and do that effectively in a way that makes some kind of sense? I don't even know what kind of magic sauce that would be required, but can she disavow all of her previous political opinions and put together a coherent narrative involving a VP pick and a story about why she should become president that makes her appear to be normal?
Okay, so all 6 of the vice presidential white guys that are being seriously considered, apparently, are all pretty rational, aren't they?
I think more so than her. Yeah.
Right. So they're probably a good pick. On your point about hanging, I'm not sure I like to use those words anymore. On pinning nefarious philosophies to her that she has said herself. The same can be done with Trump, right? I mean, he's got 2 or 3 fatal flaws.
Right, but that's already baked into his numbers. I don't think people have ever looked into
Well, and he
Kamala Harris.
lost last time, and then he
Huh?
had an insurrection. So they're baked into his numbers, but it didn't get better. He lost
Right.
and
Which is why she
tried.
still has a chance to win. But right now, nobody's gonna. She's never gonna have a better chance to define herself than she has right now. And if she does not define herself, she will be defined as being the person she has been for her whole life.
Gotcha. So that's
So
what
she
we should.
better come up with a new story, or people are going to say this is who she is.
Gotcha. So that's what we should be looking for in the next week or two
Yeah.
to see what
How
he
does
has
she?
that.
How is she trying to define herself as being something else?
Yeah. Fascinating. Last call that you wanted to talk about that I never got to. Anything else things for us to ponder?
No, I think we got it covered. It's
Okay.
certainly been one of those weeks where I was talking to one of my good friends from the past who's still fairly connected, fairly high up in the Trump world, and it is simply a mistake to think that people don't see him for who he is. Even the people closest to him, and we are vastly underestimating how much the American people are desperate for a normal candidate.
Yeah.
And the restoration, essentially, that's why a lot of people feel so negatively about Biden above anything else, is one of the things he promised was normalcy, and if people who say that he governed as a moderate, no, he didn't. He had a spending plan that was bigger than anything since the New Deal. It was massive. And there weren't a lot of signals from the Biden administration that he was interested in being anything other than a partisan.
Yeah. Well, and my more liberal friends were always mad at him for not even being more liberal.
I don't know how he could have been. I want to see that list.
They kept going. The pressure on him to become more liberal. I didn't get a lot of outreach of the centrist, moderate, former Republican. I didn't get any of that outreach. I think the pressure on him was to be more liberal, not more.
Yeah. I would just say between the two of us, no Republican candidate has wants my support, and no Democrat wants my support.
Yeah.
And why would I give them my support when nobody is asking?
You're saying most of America, even insiders, are yearning for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating point to end. I'm good with that right there. I think we should end. Art and Jake, thank you. Jake, I apologize. I'm never going to critique your looks again because I'd sure hate to have you look at me. All right. Professor.
Bart is always he should be the face of the podcast, I think.
Yeah, you do like a lawyer, so good at you. All right, Professor, hope you have a good week. Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, Jake has one last point.
John.
Let him get his.
Yeah, Jake.
I just want to do an update since I've been road tripping through Oregon and Washington this past week. Beautiful, beautiful country. Just gotta say that. But yesterday or 2 days ago, we drove up the northern tip of Washington state. We wanted a. I froze.
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Keep going. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just gonna keep talking. So we drove to the northern tip of Washington, and we could see Canada across the strait, the ocean, whatever. And driving back, we saw a Trump 2024 flag, and it said Trump 2024, F your feelings. And so our friend who was driving the car, she's from Washington State, and she is a progressive TikTok progressive. She doesn't think that Israel has the right to exist. She wants Medicare for all. You know, TikTok had radicalized her. But when we saw that Trump flag, she just went off. And it's like, that's the most offensive thing I've ever seen in my life. It's like, where have you been for the last 9 years that seeing that Trump flag is setting you off? Because at this point, there is virtually nothing that the Trump campaign could do that would surprise me. And so I just thought it was interesting that a girl that said, a woman who believes that, you know, the October 7th attack on Israel was justified, get that triggered by seeing that Trump flag.
Well, she has feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
I
she
mean,
does.
the people who are spray painting how much they love Hamas on national monuments it should tell you how radicalized somebody can get in isolation.
That is insane, by the way. I can't even believe they would do that. And think that that's going to sway over anybody except for offend everybody.
They don't
But
care.
I don't want to end on a down note like that. I'd rather
Yeah,
end on
sorry.
the last one. So, last call, but Jake, yes. Thanks for traveling up there. Most of the people are good, though, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, aren't they
Oh
good?
yeah, people.
Yeah.
Portland is miserable. Portland's miserable, but the rest of the state, like, beautiful. We've met good people, so it's been a good trip.
All right. Safe travels out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Bart. Professor,
Uh,
great job. Thank you. See you next
Yeah.
week, probably.
See ya.
Bye.